Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for the Holocaust Center for Humanities Lunch and Learn program. My name is Julia Thompson, and I am the Education Program Manager at the Holocaust Center. Our community partners this week for this Lunch and Learn are Kline Galland, the Summit at First Hill, Sephardic Bikur Holim Congregation, Chabad of Downtown Seattle, the Consulate of the Republic of Poland in Seattle, Congregation Ezra B'Sereth, and the Polish Home Association. Thank you also to the Tacoma Jewish Community Fund for sponsoring the 2021 Lunch and Learn series. This entire month, the Holocaust Center is focused on raising support for our new book-by-book small grants program. Teachers often don't have the resources they need to teach about the Holocaust. Book by Book provides grants up to $500 per teacher to Washington State public school teachers who need to purchase books that align with the center's curricula for their students. Thanks to generous supporters Kate Boris Brown and Greg Brown, we are so grateful that all donations made to the Book by Book program during February, up to $5,000, will be matched dollar for dollar. Your contributions have already allowed us to support 5 schools across the state with grants. Thank you. Shelley, a librarian from Kashmir Middle School in Chelan County, is a recent applicant. They wrote, "It is important for me to ensure my students understand the atrocities of the Holocaust. They need to know what happens when bigotry, hate, and prejudice are allowed to go unchecked. In reading the true stories of Daniel, Hannah, Irina, and others, they will know and develop the empathy needed to help create a more just world for all." You can visit our website or click on the link in the chat to navigate to the Ways to Contribute page for Book by Book donations. I am also excited to announce that starting February 21st, the Holocaust Center will reopen for visitors on Sundays with limited capacity according to the state's Phase 2 regulations. You can visit our Plan Your Visit page on the website to learn more and register. Before I introduce our guest speaker, Josh Gortler, we want to acknowledge that the Holocaust Center for Humanity in downtown Seattle sits on the ancestral lands of the Duwamish people, the first people of Seattle. The Duwamish continue to honor and bring to light their ancient heritage, and we strive to join them in this endeavor. Those of you who attended our last 2 Lunch and Learns on local Native American history have already heard several perspectives on how crucial knowing this history and culture is. Those 2 programs' recordings are available to rewatch on our website. And now, today, I am so pleased to be in conversation with Joshua Gortler, Holocaust survivor and an author of the recently published memoir, Among the Remnants. As you'll hear from him today, Josh grew up all over Europe and Asia in the wake of the Nazi and Soviet invasion of his home country, Poland. He was forced to move all around due to the horrors of the Holocaust and prejudice. He came to the United States in 1951 at the age of 15. Josh graduated from high school in New York City before earning a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in social work from Yeshiva University. Josh then moved to Seattle in 1969 and worked at the Kline Galland Senior Care Organization, including as executive director, for almost 50 years. He began telling his story when his grandchildren asked what happened to him during the Holocaust. In 2014, Josh was honored by Yeshiva University with a doctoral degree for his leadership in elder care in Seattle and nationally. And of course, his memoir, Among the Remnants, was just recently published this year by Coffeetown Press and was written in cooperation with Gigi Yellen-Cohn. We will save time today to take your questions, so please add yours to the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We may be addressing questions that pertain to a particular topic without waiting until the end, so you're welcome to type them in at any time. Before Josh Gortler joins us on the virtual stage, let's watch a 2-minute video from the Holocaust Center's annual luncheon back in 2014, which honored Josh.
educate, inspire, take action.
I am a survivor. I survived Hitler.
Along with dozens of other survivors, Josh is frequently on the road, taking the Holocaust Center's message to audiences at Western Washington schools and community events. His visits to Spanaway Lake High School are popular with students.
90% of the Jews of Poland perished in the Holocaust. 4, 5, 6, 10 is 100%, okay? Everybody sit down except this guy in red. Everybody sit down. Only 10% survived.
Every year, the center takes its message to the Kitsap County Juvenile Detention Center.
All of a sudden, you're uprooted, thrown out.
As a child, Josh watched the Nazis take his grandfather away.
We never saw him again. My grandfather was hung.
Josh teaches not only the horror of the Holocaust, but the value of overcoming adversity at every level.
Good luck from the outside, stay well.
For these young people struggling with their own challenges, message received.
They see that there's a possibility that they can succeed also, that they can change their lives.
This is Jordan, the day Josh spoke.
I've had troubles with people leaving me. I've been in foster care, family taken away from me. Mr. Gortler's story made me feel like I could do better and make more of my life.
And this is Jordan today. His life turned around, thanks, he says, to Josh.
I actually think you're the one that actually made me step up and actually started getting my life on track.
I was there. I was a witness what happened. It's terrible history, but we learn from those experiences to make sure that these type of atrocities are never repeated again.
All right. Josh, thank you so much for joining me to have this conversation today. It's just such a pleasure. So thank you. So let's get into it. We'll do some questions about your book and your Holocaust experiences, of course, and we'll see what we can cover in the next half hour. So first, I'm going to share an image of your book here. And I'm wondering if you can tell us why you titled your book Among the Remnants.
First of all, good afternoon, everyone. And it's a pleasure to join you in conversation. I wish that times would have been different, that I could be physically with you and you with me. There's always a greater way of communicating when we see eye to eye, face to face. But unfortunately, we have to resort to technology, which I am very much uneducated and technically illiterate. But at any rate, good afternoon, and thank you for joining me. The title of my book is Among the Remnants. It's a Hebrew term that's applied to those atrocities through the centuries that survived and came back to the Holy Land, to Israel, were known as the Sherit HaPleita, the remnants. And those of us who survived and ended up in the DP camps, which we'll explore in a little while from now, refer to ourselves as Sherit HaPleita, the remnants of the atrocity of the Second World War. The term Sherit HaPleita first appears in the first book of our Bible, in Bereshit. And the text reads in Hebrew, Vayomer, and Jacob says, Im yavo Esaf el hamachane achat vehikehu, v'haya hamachane hanishar lefleita. If Esau will come and kill half of my family, the other half will survive, will live and flourish. And that's why I have chosen the term Sherita Pleita among the remnants. And we will try to see my journey, both physically and miles that I traveled from my hometown to Seattle, Washington. Unfortunately, I did not earn miles for the travel, but I learned a lot of life experiences. Okay, Julia?
Yes, Josh, I actually wanted to bring up your co-author Gigi just wrote into the chat that the title also alludes to your mother's skill as a seamstress, which I did not know.
We talk a little bit in the book. My mother was an expert seamstress, and she had her own shop with about 10 people working for her. And my father was in the lumber business in a small little town right next to Tomashov called Krasnobrod. And our family actually goes back, the Jews in Tomashov go back to the 1600s. Here we see a map of Tomashov and in relationship to the border. And that is extremely, extremely important because we were very close to the Soviet Union. And now it's Ukraine. And because of the closeness of Tomashov to Russia, I survived. In 1939, the city of Tomashov was invaded by the Nazis. There was a fierce, fierce battle. It was one of the last battles that the Polish army fought was Tomashov. And the entire city was destroyed. All the Jews of Tomashov were gathered in this particular area. You can see even this is in 1939, 1938, a picture of the main synagogue with a flourishing community. And today Tomashov is Judenrein. There's not a Jew left in Tomashov. The only Jews that are in Tomashov are in the cemetery. When the Nazis entered that little town, they gathered all the Jews. Imagine 3-year-old Josh, or not Josh, 3-year-old Shia, I should say, with his family were gathered in the courtyard that you see in front of you. And then it came time to recite the morning prayer. My grandfather, Yaakov, Olav HaShalom, was an extremely religious individual. He was one of the elders. He was a dayan, a judge in the city. When it came to recite the prayer, my grandfather put on his talit and tefillin and asked women to separate from the man. Unfortunately, there was no separation space available. So my grandfather leaves the compound where we are. He leaves to pray outside of the area that was surrounded, that we were in. And he was found dead, hung by his tree, on a tree, with his face dangling down by his feet on the tree. What was his sin? What did he commit to be ended up in this type of a situation? Only thing is because he was a Jew. And under the Nazis, the Jews had no right to live. And this is how my journey begins. from the little town of Tomashov. And if you go back to the map very quickly, you will see the border from Tomashov to the Soviet Union. We escape Tomashov area into the Soviet Union, and we ended up in a little place called Ravaruska. This is a document that my grandson Yosef, who was working in Washington, D.C., found, and it clarified so many things to me. This is an actual document from the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. It's not on the website. He found it by going through page by page to find this document. And very quickly, you can see the translation from Polish to English, Shia, that was my name. And you will find Shia spelled at least 8 to 10 different spelling. Here it's spelled S-H-I-A Gortler.
Mm-hmm.
My middle name is Yoshevitz. That's the face of Yosef, was my father. And where I was born. And the next item is so interesting. I was assigned for temporary residence in Medvedka with amnesty from July 1940 to June 1941.
Now, let's take a look at that journey on the map. So we've got...
I leave Tomashov with the Russian army, and my journey begins to Medvedka in the Soviet Union. What is such a miracle that I'm with you today is because of God's intervention. It was not a hero. It was God's intervention that the Jews escaped, the remnants escaped, and made an impact on the entire Jewish world around today. So the miracle is this: 19 days after the Russians returned to Ravaruski, the entire Jewish community was killed. Everyone. And from there, I begin to the next destination. And this red little dot moves. Julia, let's move on. And from Medvedka, I end up in Siberia. All the way in Siberia. Here you have an image of what the Jews did in Siberia. We were basically incarcerated. The Russians used the Jews to cut down trees, lumber, create lumber for the Soviet army. Look at this temperature, 24 below zero. Records went as low as 60 below zero. This is where we lived. We ate potatoes. We drank melted down snow. Since there was no light, basically, in the wintertime, many people, because it's up north, many people lost their eyesight, lost parts of their bodies from the frozen temperatures. And what's so important that it was to look at the temperature, because right after my travel begins to another part of the world, from Siberia, we moved down to Asia. We moved to Tashkent. Now look at those miles that we covered. I lived in this type of a dwelling. made out of straw. We slept on the floor, no floor, the ground, with a little bit of straw that we put as our mattresses. Incidentally, I didn't know what a mattress was, what a real bed was, till 1951, when I came to America. I never slept on a mattress. I never slept with sheets, and I never slept with a blanket that covered me. Look at those temperatures, what happened in Tashkent area. We lived in a kolkhoz. A kolkhoz is a communal living arrangement. Temperatures went up to 112. The disease that I experienced is beyond. Malaria was the most common disease. When malaria hit me, my body temperature went up to 110, convulsions. And then I started to shake from the cold, from 110 degrees to below normal, 100 to 85, 90 degrees, almost dead. To treat malaria, we were treated with a medicine called quinine. And quinine was injected in our buttocks. All the people, children and adults separately, were lined up in a straight line. And a nurse went from child to child with the needle, which I thought must have been a foot long, and injected that needle in each buttock without wiping even off that needle. Luckily, we survived Tashkent. The war is over in 1945, and the Jews had the opportunity to stay in Russia or to move back to Poland. My shtetl Tomaszów, my little town of Tomaszów. And once again, we went on cattle cars that were inhumane. The train, it appeared to me as a child, we were there for weeks to move from Russia, from Tashkent back to Poland. There was no schedule. We were just loaded up on those trains, and we would stay for days in a train station, and then a locomotive would come and hook up to us and schlep the few cattle cars to another destination and leave us there. Sometimes the train came back to the same place where we started. We finally enter Poland, and we were thought that, oh my gosh, freedom, we are back to our homeland, motherland of Poland. And we came into Tomaszów. Unfortunately, people did not welcome us with open arms. Our house destroyed, businesses gone. My father was a smart man. He was in the lumber business, and he had a vision to get out of Poland again and go to West, go to, from all places, back to Germany, to Berlin.
So I'll share some maps of this, and you can tell us about what you found upon getting to Germany.
My father and a few other people told the Polish government, the city of Tomaszów, that they wanted to restart the lumber business. They got a decent loan, got a truck, loaded up the people from Tomaszów. We went to Szczecin, which is the border between Poland and that time Germany. And we got on those trucks, a truck, paid off the Russian guards, which was the first zone. Berlin was divided into 4 zones: Russia, British, French, and US. Destination for us was Berlin, USA, the American zone. And as we entered with the trucks to Berlin, we entered a DP camp. That's the first time that I saw a new life. I lived in 3 DP camps, displaced people camp. I came to those camps uneducated in Hebrew. I didn't know what an aleph was. In English or Latin, I didn't know what the A was, the letter A. I didn't know how to use utensils. How do you use a fork? Who needs a fork? All we had was a wooden spoon when we came into Berlin. These are some images of myself. This image right here is my father and my uncle Chaim in Berlin. My first education begins. We were taught how to recognize our name. The teachers took by hand and traced our alphabet to learn how to recognize the English alphabet and how to recognize the Hebrew alphabet. The education in the DP camps made me who I am today. There were 2 types of educational systems in the DP camp. There was the secular, the Beit Sefer Tarbuti, and the yeshiva, the Talmud Torah. And here you see both types of schools. The red arrow indicates this is me. Next to me is my brother Moshe. And on top it says Yeshivas Bnei Akiva. That's how I got my Hebrew education. Hebrew means the religious education, should I say. And underneath, you see the Bet Sefer Amami, where all the subjects were taught to us in Hebrew. So my mind was going crazy. Do I write from right to left? Do I go from left to right? How do I pronounce the Hebrew? How do I pronounce the Torah education? And I was like a sponge. At the age of 10, 1945, 46, I was born in 36, now I'm 46. I knew absolutely nothing. When I entered the DP camp, just as a sideline, I saw a urinal and I saw water in that urinal. I had no idea what that was, because in the past, we saw water in the ground, in a lake, we put our face down, we drank. When I saw the urinal, I put my face down. And that's how I drank the first time, before realizing that this is not where people drink, people were there relieve themselves. A few interesting things happened in that DP camp that I say, what I am today, I owe it to my parents, my teachers in the DP camp. There was every day 1 or 2 weddings. People were multiplying because the survivors, the remnants, had one thing in mind. we lost 6 million, and we have to reclaim those 6 million. And there was weddings, there was bris, circumcisions, there were bar mitzvahs continuously. In 1947, the UN is about to make a major decision to create 2 states. And here you see a group of us, the kid in the middle blowing the shofar, that's me. We are marching in behalf of the state of Israel to be Palestine at that time. And one early morning, we hear over the loudspeakers, Achtung, 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 attention, attention, attention. There is a UN meeting going on in New York that came from the BBC. It's a local announcer. We got our news from loudspeakers in the camp. There was a radio. We all listened to that moment when the counting began and the state of Palestine was created. And the doors for the Jews were opened. A great majority of the people in the DP camps, the survivors, the remnants, left for Palestine, including my cousin, Yehuda, Rachel, and Sarah, with their mother. Their father perished. From my father's side, the entire family was killed. There only an aunt and 3 of my cousins from my father's side survived. There were 7 siblings and their families, all perished in the Holocaust. I'm now 15 years old, 14 years old, living in the DP camp. My parents' aim was to bring us to the United States. I'd like to share with you the one other item that meant so much to me and to everyone. In Munich, Germany, Hitler wrote his manifesto called Mein Kampf. And in Mein Kampf, Hitler wants to do the final solution to kill the few remnants, everybody, all the Jews he was about to kill. But look what happens, the mentality of the leadership of the Jews in the DP camps. The first thing that they do is create educational system for their children. The presses that were printing Mein Kampf now print Jewish books, the Holy Bible, the Jewish book, the Tanakh, the Bible, was printed on the same press in Munich where Mein Kampf was printed in the 1930s and in 1947. 1947, you have the print of this holy book, the Torah, Hamisheh Chumshei Torah. The interesting things which we don't have the time to read, it's a beautiful inscription. And the Tanakh is dedicated to one person, Harry S. Truman, the man who opened up the doors for more Jews to come to the United States and was the first country to recognize Palestine as a Jewish homeland.
Right. So Josh, when did you receive this? Did you receive it right upon printing?
I bet you actually I received this book in my second DP camp, which was New Ulm.
Okay.
I got this book as we began to read the Chumash, the Torah. We began to study Bereshit from this particular book. It was in much better shape than it is today.
Sure.
But the value to me is unbelievable. I look at it, I share with it. There was also printing of other things in the DP camp. The first books, do you have a copy of this, an image or not, Julia?
No, that one I don't
You
have.
have this? You don't? Okay, so let's zoom in. This is a book of the Talmud. And this was printed in the DP camps. There were 2 or 3 books like that for the whole class. At the end of my journey in the DP camp and about to leave for America, we'll talk in a few minutes about that as well, my teacher gave this book to me. Let me read the inside of this book. It said, Matana me'et Rabbi Yaakov Friedman Halevi, a gift from the Rabbi Yaakov Friedman the Levite, the Talmud Gortler Yehoshua, to his student Joshua Gortler, Kan b'Machane Fernwald, in the camp of Fernwald, and the date, 1951. So this is who I am today. I became a man who I am today in the DP camps.
And you,
After a long, Julia, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you do write at great length in the book about the time in the DP camps, which is so important because it's, a post-war facet of the history that a lot of people don't know about. So I think the fact that you devoted many chapters to your time there is a testament to how important it was for you and for so many other survivors.
I think it's so important because, when you look at contemporary Jewish history, now, but when I talk contemporary Jewish history, I look from the 30s till now. They look at 2 major events: the Holocaust, the killing, and the state of Israel. But in between the Holocaust and the state of Israel, there's a period of Jewish history that is really not recognized, which it should, because that period, the period from 1945 to 1948, is a period where the Jews as a totality have emerged. That's where we got our start in the DP camps. And if you look today in American leadership, on world leadership, you scratch it, you will find a person who is among the survivors, among the remnants.
Yeah. So Josh, in the interest of time, let's talk a little bit about leaving Europe. So what year did you come to America? Tell us a bit about that.
Okay, I'm leaving Europe on a very, very long journey to New Orleans. And I did do some research, and I want to thank Julia, who was so tremendous help in my research for today. This is the ship. We found the actual ship that I traveled from Bremerhaven, Germany to New Orleans. It took about 2 weeks for this journey. you can see it's not the Queen Mary. That is the ship that I sailed for about 2 weeks from Bremerhaven to New Orleans. New Orleans was the place that I first entered America. And from there, we went by train to Phoenix, Arizona. And as I mentioned, when we arrived to Phoenix, the Jewish Family Service of Phoenix met us at the train station to welcome us. None of us spoke any English. We had name tags with our names to be recognized who we are. And we met by social workers and the sponsoring family. And soon we began to look at our names. My father's name was Joseph, which became Joseph, Joe. My mother's name was Estera. It became Esther. My brother's name was Moses. Morris became his name. And now comes to my name, Shia. What in the world is the name Shia? How do you spell it? Well, we have 5 or 6 different spellings. The social worker says to me, you know, with a name like Shia, you ain't going to make it. You're not going to make it in America. We got to give you a very strong, non-Jewish name because you got to be integrated right away into society. And in 10 minutes or less, my name became James. So first year I am in Phoenix, Arizona. I go to high school, starting learning English, learning a profession with the name of James. My parents saw that there's very little future. And as I met, well, I have to go back to this, to the first apartment we got was a 1-bedroom apartment, which was a palace. My parents slept in the bedroom, my brother and I on a couch in the living room. It is the first time that I mentioned I had a mattress. It is the first time that we had a toilet for our own. I never knew that before. Running from place to place, I don't want to go into details, but running water inside hot and cold is the first time that I saw when we came to Phoenix. My father always called it Phonics, not Phoenix.
Right.
And soon, very quickly, my father realized that, you know, we need to get him a different education, and the time is running on, so we really need to move on. And the Jewish Family Service buys me a ticket to New York, and I go on a Greyhound bus. The Greyhound bus in those days, and we have a picture of my Greyhound bus and the driver. Is it there?
Yeah, it's coming.
Okay,
Go
I
ahead.
can talk. And there is my Greyhound bus. This is what it looked like. I climb onto that bus, and most of the seats up in the front were taken. But in the back, there were a lot of seats. So I go all the way to the back. And all of a sudden, the driver says to me, "Hey, dude," now I have another name, but dude, I'm now called, "you ain't going to sit there." I said, "Why not?" He said, "That's for black people," but he didn't use the term black. He used the N-word. And all of a sudden, I realized, my gosh, I am white. I didn't realize that the black people have different rules and regulations in the United States. But that is the 1950s. In the United States, my parents put me on that bus with 2 sandwiches, $20 in my pocket, and off I go to New York to Yeshiva University High School.
Yeah.
Arrangements were made for me to be a student, but no arrangements were made for me where I'm going to be sleeping. Soon, a note went out to some students, and they took me in until a room was available in the dormitory. Where do we go with this now?
Well, Josh, we've got about 15 minutes left, so I thought we might jump into a few questions that
I
relate.
do want to read one paragraph from the book,
Sure, please.
because all of you know me as Josh or Joshua, and I want to go through the metamorphosis of the name during my exam.
Yeah, go ahead.
Here we go. And because I do want to leave questions for answers. This is in my first day at Yeshiva University. And I read from the book. I came to meet Rabbi Sachs in his office. I entered the office with trepidation. My entire body was shaking. I knew that Rabbi Mendel Sachs was the son-in-law of the great Chofetz Chaim. That was enough yichus to be plenty intimidating. Rabbi Sachs was a man with a gray beard who would smoke cigarettes continuously. As I entered the room, I said to him in Yiddish, "Good morning, good morning." Rabbi Sachs answered, "Good morning. Was ist Euer Nomen? What is your name?" "My Nomen," I answered proudly, "is James. My name is James. Aber ihr kennt mich riefen Jimmy. You can call me Jimmy." He puffed his cigarette and he says, "Was für ein Jiddischer Nomen is James? What kind of Jewish name is James? What is dein Hebräischer Name? What is your Hebrew name, your Yiddish name?" "My Yiddish name is Shia. My Hebräischer name is Yehoshua." "Oh, Yehoshua. Dein Name in Amerika wird sein Joshua. And deine friend will dich riefen Josh." So here I went from Shia to Jimmy to James and back to Joshua, where I started.
And it was in part thanks to Rabbi Sachs.
Correct.
Well, Josh, again, we've got some great questions, so I want to get into them in a minute.
Okay.
But kind of to, I guess, wrap up, your life's trajectory. I mentioned in your intro that you ended up getting your master's degree in social work from Yeshiva University, right? And then can you just share with us how you ended up in Seattle?
Among my jobs, I had two previous jobs in leading agencies in the New York area. A job came to, the first job was working in the Englewood Jewish Community Center, and then I worked in a place called United Help in the Flushing YMHA. I gave a paper on a national meeting, how to create new programs for the elderly. And in their audience was an individual from United Way of Seattle. He invited me immediately to come for an interview to head up the senior services of Seattle. And I mentioned to them that I don't think they knew what they were doing. Come back in a few years and I may consider it. And then I got a call from someone at a Jewish nursing home, the Kline Galland, who was in New York. And he said, "We heard about your work with the elderly. We have an opening. Would you like to come out to Seattle for an interview?" I came out for the interview, spent 2 days in Seattle. The job was offered to me at Kline Galland, which is a very, very small institution. It was under the ownership, basically, not of the Jewish community, but the ownership of the Seattle Trust, Savings Trust and Bank. And I promised them I'll be here for 2 years. I brought out my family, my wife, and 2 young children. And from 2 years, it became close to 50 years, where I spent my entire professional life in building and developing the Jewish services for the elderly in Seattle. Our budget when I came out here was in $250,000, $250,000. When I left, the operating budget was over 36 million, and also a very strong endowment foundation as well.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, your accomplishments in that arena have been huge. And the back appendices of your book have a few lovely little essays and notes from folks who you worked with over the years. Well, let's move into a couple questions from attendees because there's some great ones. And I know we won't have time for everything, but more for another program, maybe. So a question that actually came in about your writing process, just how did you manage to get some of these stories and experiences into book form? What was that like?
Okay. Originally, this was supposed to be a little memoir, a pamphlet for my children, and it turned out to be a project. As I said, I started it when I was 81 years old. It took 81 years to live and 3 years to write. And thanks to Gigi Ellen Cohen, who was an amazing co-author of this book, we started off by me talking to into a tape recorder, not a tape recorder anymore, but it's a cell phone, and that was transcribed and edited and re-edited. It took 3 years from the project when we first started it until the book came into existence. And again, I have to say that Julia and the staff at the Holocaust Center were amazing help for the research, and also while I was writing and rewriting and to come up with this book. 3 years.
Yeah, big process.
And again, I devote a great deal of time, a great deal of writing about the DP camps and also the history of the Kline Galland home, from a very tiny little place, to what is today one of the major Jewish services for the elderly around the country.
Thanks, Josh. Now, a question from Jacqueline, kind of pivoting back to the beginning of your story and being forced to leave your home. Were you by yourself at any point, or were you with the rest of your family?
Excellent question. We first left together, and we were incarcerated in a ghetto. My father was able for us to escape the ghetto in Zamość, and through connections in the Gentile world. There were righteous Poles as well. There were murderers, but there were very good people as well. I hate to use very good people on both sides. That doesn't sound very good today. But at any rate, I was living with a Polish family for a while as a non-Jew. And my mother said, if we have to die, we'll die together. So they came back to the farm where I and my brother were hidden, and they got us, and we went to Ravaruska together as a unit and survived Siberia, Tashkent as a unit.
Okay, thank you. So many great questions. How about your experience coming to America? So you arrived in New Orleans and then to Phoenix. Somebody is asking whether there are other Jewish refugees who went to Phoenix with you.
No, we were the only ones at that time from this particular ship. We're the only family that came to Phoenix to be resettled. There were 3 or 4 families already in Phoenix. Now, since we did not have relatives who could sponsor us to the United States, we went into a lottery, and smaller communities began to adapt refugees. So now I'm not a survivor, I'm not a remnant, now I'm a refugee. And the Jewish Family Service of Phoenix actually brought us to a sponsoring family into Phoenix. And later on, there were a few other families that joined in, were resettled. But I would say there were about 10 or 15 families total in Phoenix.
Mm. Yeah,
But
and I
I didn't know anyone, Edit, if there, none of the families we knew in Phoenix before we came.
right. And there's some great images in the book for those of you who have it or will have it of the correspondence between the social service organizations about, okay, are you going to Phoenix? Is your family going somewhere else? The family'd really like to be in New York, but that was not where you were settled.
Right. And Phoenix in those days was a real desert. There was very little what we call Yiddishkeit, Jewish life. And that's why my parents immediately put me on that Greyhound bus and sent me off with 2 sandwiches to the big city.
Mm-hmm. So with our last couple of moments, I wanted to cover a question that I ask many survivors when we do programs, and that is, what advice do you have for young people today? We're living through a pandemic, lots of other, social, political unrest. What is some advice that you could give young people or anyone?
Before I go anywhere else, I must read this little, I didn't know she's on it. My good friend Petra, who is the former or emeritus consul of the Republic of Germany, is on this call. I didn't know she's there. I have no idea who is on, but Petra, I must give you credit. She joined you. Thank you for joining me today. My advice is this. The advice that I can give to young people today is to take a role in helping individuals and not to be silent when they see wrongdoings. And it kind of pops up to me every time when I speak to young people. I read this, and I'm going to read it to you, and this really is a message to everyone. First, it came for the communists, and I didn't speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the Jews. I did not speak out because I wasn't a Jew. Then they came for the Catholics, and I didn't speak out because I was not a Catholic. Then they came for the Protestant, and then they came for me. But at this time, there was nobody left to speak out. Young people, speak out, help out. A good thing, like with this snow that we had this week, we look out of our window and there is a neighbor with a shovel making a pathway for us to go in and out of the house. Not that we go in and out. So help somebody in need. Do something. That was my advice.
That's very good advice, Josh. And as we close, because it is 1 minute to 1 o'clock, I just want to draw everyone's attention to Josh's book website, joshuagortler.com, where you can learn more, a link to purchase the book, and everything you might need to get your hands on a copy. So, Josh, I just want to thank you so much for your time. It is 1 o'clock, so that's all the time we've got. But I know that you've got plenty more to share. So if anybody has questions about this
Julia,
program.
Before we say goodbye, I know it's exactly 1 o'clock. Could you put up the last slide that we talked about?
Sure.
Why we speak out today? Yeah. Because I really want everyone to see that particular slide. It's in my website, but it made an impact on me. So if somebody has to leave, you may. Let me read it to you. Julia, can you oh, here we go. There's a time to think and there's a time to talk. And I feel that now is the time to talk and retell these stories for the future generations to come, because if we don't learn from the past, we will make the same mistakes in the future. So thank you for joining me. I hope that you learned something today about me, who you've known, many of you, as I see in the chat room, I knew for many years. So thank you for joining me. Read the book. The book is available. It's in soft cover. It's available as an ebook and also available on Audible. So the guy who's reading does a super job to imitate me. Read it, listen, and write to me. And if you want me to come from anywhere to speak and share more details, and I want to thank Julia. You did a super, super job to bring out the best what we had in this book.
Thanks, Josh. Well, I'll just close very briefly and thank all of you at home for attending this Lunch and Learn program. I want to thank Michelle Quinones for providing closed captioning, as she always does so wonderfully for us. And of course, I'm grateful for the support of my colleagues at the Holocaust Center, Richard Green, who handles our tech behind the scenes, our executive director, Dee Simon, and all of our other team members, Alana Cohn-Kennedy, Nicole Bella, Lori Warshall-Cohen, Amanda Davis, Paul Regelbrug, Rosa, Sydney Draytel, our dear Rosa Campos, retired a few weeks ago, Sydney Draytel, Ellie Selesky, Rick Brewer, Morgan Romero, and Katie Lawrence. Next week, you can join us at the same time, noon on Tuesday, February 23rd, and our Lunch and Learn will feature acclaimed speaker and author Jeannie Updike-Smith, sharing her mother Irene Gut Updike's incredible journey of courage and resilience as a Polish non-Jewish rescuer of Jews during the Holocaust.
Julia, I just want to say one thing. I just noticed that the Polish Council is also on the line. I want to thank Teresa so much for joining, because she and I had many conversations of the roles of the Poles during the war and after the war. Teresa, you are a wonderful human being, and it's great that you joined us.
Thanks, Josh. Yep, so grateful for our community partners like the Polish consulate. I'll conclude by saying the views or opinions expressed in our programs are solely those of the individuals involved, do not necessarily represent those of the Holocaust Center for Humanity. And today's Lunch and Learn has been recorded, and you'll find that recording on our website starting tomorrow. Stay safe, everyone, and this concludes our program today.